Hi, Dr. Lai. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening. This is our 7th session, right?
Yes, it's the 7th.
Of 8, or how many is the total?
Until somebody attains Buddha.
Sounds good. We keep it on going. That's good. That's wonderful.
59.
59. Okay, thanks, Larry.
7 points. So this could be the last if somebody attains Buddha. So good evening. I think we can start now. This is the Mahayana Lojong in 7 points. And this is the 7th part of this series. If you just joined us, in fact, helping me kind of manage the traffic for this program is Fabiola, who is also in Nashville. Normally, we would be meeting at the temple for Open Sangha every Thursday, 7:30 to 9. But then, of course, right now, like most other places, if not all other places, we are doing our programs online. Thus far, we think that we're quite happy and satisfied with what we've been able to do via Facebook, via Zoom. We want to thank you for continuing to join us, and also thank all those of you who have generously helped with donations for the center. Of course, rent still has to be paid. Utilities we're barely using, so that's very minimal. But again, I want to register especially a thanks to everyone for helping us keep the center available, whether in real time, the temple we have in downtown Asheville, or also doing it online in this way. We are about to start, and we will be sending out that announcement. A course that is actually designed for the younger, for kids. It's our instructor, Elise Cross, who does the meditation for the young. She has recorded a number of classes that we're going to offer that you can sign up, and you can do the classes at your own pace. It's a wonderful thing available for the younger. So we're going to be sending out details, and so we are now working on the technology to do it so that it's basically you get sent the installments according to the schedule that you want, and you do it at your own pace. So once we do that, and we're confident that we have figured out how to do that well, then there will be other programs offered by Dharma that you can also sign up in that form. Do it at your own pace, do it at your own time. So it's a little bit different from this series, where for the most part, everyone who is participating are gathered together via Zoom and via Facebook. So we are going to start now. So today I want to start with some common recitations that we often do at Urban Dharma. When the Sangha gathers at Urban Dharma, we follow the conventions of the Dukung Kagyu lineage of Tibetan Buddhism in using the opening recitations from that particular lineage and tradition, primarily because I myself is anchored by that tradition, that lineage, and many of the other people actively involved at Urban Dharma are also anchored by that tradition. But Urban Dharma itself is not necessarily exclusively Dukung Kagyu or even Tibetan, because we have a number of programs that take place there that is not necessarily from the Tibetan tradition. And so anyway, the opening, the common recitations for the opening is the recitations for generating bodhicitta, relative bodhicitta, and the recitation for taking refuge, and the recitation for the four immeasurable minds. So I'm going to do this now in English, and you can just listen. If you're familiar with it, if you know it, of course, you can join me in saying, in doing this recitation. Then from the recitation, we're going to go straight into the guided meditation portion of this program. Yeah? So we're going to start in this manner. All mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in a state of the most perfect and precious awakening. All mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious awakening. All mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, may they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in a state of the most perfect and precious awakening. Thus, until I achieve awakening, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until awakening is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all migratory beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until awakening is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all migratory beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until awakening is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all migratory beings. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. So according to Geshe Chekawa's Mahayana Lojong in 7 points, point number 2, which is considered the main practice of Lojong, is the training in the 2 Bodhicittas. First, one trains in absolute Bodhicitta, and then one trains in relative Bodhicitta. Before formally training in either absolute Bodhicitta or relative Bodhicitta, the first point in the 7 points is the training in the preliminaries. In the preliminaries, first it says, begin by training in the preliminaries. The preliminaries are the foundation of all our other practices, of all the other trainings. Therefore, it is very important to attend to the foundational matters. In particular, we want to turn our minds, turn our attention away from the myriad distractions that continue to bind us, to confuse us, to frustrate us. So we have to make a determination that we want to be free from bondage, to be free from confusion, to be free from suffering, to be free from investing our time and energy in pointless, useless, and in fact, harmful things. So traditionally, the 4 thoughts or the 4 considerations that turn our mind away from confusion, away from samsara, is what's given as this most basic and yet most important training in the preliminaries. So first, consider the fact that although we now have a precious human body where we have access to the Dharma, where we have the possibility of becoming free, this will not be something that we can easily gain in the future. Therefore, cherish what we have right now. Treasure what we have right now. What we have right now is effectively not repeatable. And therefore, if we do not make good use of the opportunity that we have been afforded right now, what a waste it will be. Then consider that the time of death is uncertain. Even though death is definitely certain, but when it will come it will come all of a sudden. Whether we are 8 or we're 80, it will still be experienced as a sudden, as something that comes very suddenly and might even shock us and disappoint us. But recognize that the nature of all experiences is impermanent, subject to change, constantly changing, unstable, unreliable. And therefore now is the time to train the mind so that we can be free from the uncertainties, so that we can be free in the midst of uncertainties, so that we can be free in the midst of change. Then third, consider that all of cyclic existence, all of confused existence, existence as we know it, entails this or that degree of suffering, of dissatisfaction. See that there is not a single instant of our experiences within confused existence that truly brings happiness without any residue. Finally, consider that suffering originates in non-virtue, and happiness originates in goodness, in virtue. Therefore, it's important to know what we should adopt, what we should take up, and what we should give up. Give up all non-virtuous causes and commit ourselves to all causes of happiness, which is virtuous actions of body, speech, and mind. So this is one set of preliminaries that is important to reflect again and again as much as we can, whether in a formal session of meditation like we are engaged in right now, or throughout one's day, throughout one's waking hours, whenever we can. Take a moment to consider any of these considerations, any of these thoughts, contemplations, to turn the mind away from confusion, from distraction, from the causes of dissatisfaction and suffering. Again and again, we should reflect on this. Then at your own pace, when you are ready, start to turn your attention to how your body and mind is right now. Is your body and mind occupying the same space, present in this moment, or not? Observe that. Investigate that. If they are in fact present in the same space in this moment, then just remain with that presence. And if they are not, then turn your attention to allowing body and mind to settle into their own places. Trusting that all you have to do is to get out of the way and allow body to settle into its own place of ease and openness. And also trust that mind will also settle into its own place if we would get out of our way, if we would drop our agendas, drop our desires, drops our hopes and our fears, and simply understand that during this period of meditation, all we have to do is to be present, present in this body, present on this spot, in this moment. So now let body and mind settle, which is the next set of preliminaries that is necessary before we start meditating on absolute bodhicitta. Then at your own pace, when you are ready, where you feel that both body and mind are present in the same place at the same moment, then begin to train in counting your inhalation and exhalation, counting from 1 to 21. One inhalation and exhalation, mentally count 1. Next inhalation and exhalation, mentally count 2. And in this way, count all the way to 21. Wherever you get distracted, whether it is at 4 or count 8 or count number 14, no worries. Just gently go back and start the count back to 1. And when you can count all the way to 21, you know that your mind has now become more pliable, more workable, more willing to be reined in, more willing to cooperate. And that is a good place to arrive at when our minds become more cooperative, becomes more pliable, becomes more workable, which is what this preliminary of counting breath to 21 is aimed at. It is not so much that we're trying to control and to bind the mind. It is more that we are trying to make the mind workable, make the mind flexible. So inhale, exhale, 1. Inhale, exhale, 2. All the way to 21. In between sets of 21, you can break and not count for a while and just settle. And then when you're ready, you can start counting again. And sometimes, in fact, you can count backwards from 21 to 20 to 19. Especially if the counting has become rather mechanical. If the counting has become drowsy, then you can count backwards from 21 down to 1. And then 1 up to 21. Or you could do the technique of counting in 3 sets. Inhale 1, exhale 1. Inhale 1, exhale 2. Then 1, 3, all the way to 1, 7. Then 2, 1, 2, 2 to 2, 7. 3, 1, 3, 2 to 3, 7. As we continue to train in establishing presence by counting our breaths from 1 to 21, we can recollect the 2 lines from the training in Absolute Bodhicitta. Let the words of these 2 lines serve as prompts for how to relate to thoughts, feelings, emotions, any kind of distractions that turn up while we are training in remaining present to our own awareness, to our own breath. And in this way, as we continue to train to make the mind more workable, more cooperative, we can also begin to develop the wisdom aspect of bodhicitta, which is in the training in Absolute Bodhicitta. So the 2 lines that we now should think about and to remember, to recollect. First line is, regard all phenomena, and in this case, during our meditation, all experiences, all thoughts, all distractions, all emotions, all feelings, including physical feelings, physical sensations of itch or pain or stress in any particular part of the body. Whatever turns up, look at them as if they are experiences that we see in a dream, experiences that we have in a dream. In other words, they could be vivid, they could be unclear, but they all share in the single quality of being unreal. So this is a strategy that we're adopting at this point, to regard all experiences as dreamlike, as movie-like. But though it begins as a strategy, as a position that we take, eventually we will see how, in fact, it is indeed the case that all experiences have this dreamlike quality. And in this way, we do not need to be bound by, to be dragged around by our feelings, our thoughts, our beliefs, our concepts, our ideas. That if we're going to have concepts, ideas, feelings, emotions, we should relate to them skillfully. We should remain the master rather than becoming a slave to these concepts, these ideas, these thoughts, these perceptions that we have. So this training in Absolute Bodhicitta is a training in wisdom, in seeing clearly the nature of all experiences. When we see the nature of experiences as being illusory, where that takes us to is we become free, even in the midst of thoughts, emotions, distractions, whatever it is that turns up, we no longer need to be dragged around by them. Neither do we need to fear them. Neither do we need to get rid of them. They can all turn up, stay a little bit, and then go when it's time to go. So the first liner in the Absolute Bodhicitta section is to regard all phenomena as dreams. And the second line is examine, or you could say recognize, the nature of birthless awareness. So the first line pertains to the objective end of experience, seeing how all objects are illusory and dreamlike. And the second line is pointing to the subjective end of experiences, the subject that is having all these experiences. Do not solidify this subject. See how even this subject is only existing from moment to moment. And in this way, we need not carry the burden of thinking I am this or I am that, or I have lived up to this and I have not lived up to that. That we can let go as well. So when we let go of fixating on subject and fixating on object, what happens is that we then can experience the freedom that is innate. Innate, but because we don't understand, because we don't recognize the nature of subjective experience and objective reality, so to say, then we become trapped. Then we become stuck. So continue to mainly anchor your attention on the counting of breath. Then whatever turns up that is distracting you from your counting of your breath, remember these two lines from the training in absolute bodhicitta. Regard all phenomena as dreams. Examine the nature of birthless awareness. regard all phenomena as dreams. This entire world of the external environment and all the beings within it, which are by nature mere appearances, are nothing but the apparitions or projections of our own confused mind. In this way, not even a single atom exists with a reality separate from this mind of ours. When we look at this carefully and closely, we will come to realize that even on the conventional level, we cannot find anything that exists independently out there. So that there's no problems, no worries, no pain, no suffering beyond what the mind carries as a burden. Therefore, recognize how all experiences arise from the confused mind. And contemplate it in this way. Not a single atom exists with the reality that is separate from this mind of ours. Therefore, all experiences that we have, that which we habitually label as desirable and undesirable, as pleasure and as pain, they are nothing but experiences experienced by our confused mind. Recognize that. From the most pleasurable to the most painful experience that we can have, and everything in between, every experience in between these two extremes, they are nothing that is independent from the mind that experiences them. Therefore, this mind is the one that determines the quality of our experience. And all experiences are merely like the images that arises in a dream, like the colors and the sounds that one sees in a movie. Relate to them as dreamlike. Relate to them as movie-like. As vivid and as clear and as quote-unquote real as they are, ultimately, they cannot touch you. And so you become free from being dragged around by experiences. So we will take a very brief break, and then we will have the discussion and teaching part of this evening's program. Just about 5-7 minutes so that you can stretch a little bit, maybe take a sip of water, and then we will be back. So we are back. Maybe we can start with to see if you have anything to share in terms of learning how to begin to now incorporate those two statements, the two one-liners, yeah, from the Absolute Bodhicitta section, which says, regard all phenomena as dreams and examine the nature of birthless awareness. Specifically, I'm asking for you to see if you have anything to questions, or maybe even just something to share about your experience of how to use those two prompts during the formal meditation. If you have any insights or if you have any questions, we can maybe talk about that.
Well, the only thing and this is Joan speaking.
Hello.
Hello. The only thing I'm kind of realizing right now is when I was meditating and then those thought scenarios came up and I went away for a while and then I said, oh, and I came back, but it's so much like going to sleep and having a dream, literally. It's like the same.
Uh-huh.
So,
when you say you went away, what do you mean by that? Say a little bit more.
When I went away, the counting was still happening, but like a very soft counting. And then my mind was progressing in whatever it was, whatever that thought was.
Right. Went away as in being dragged away by that thought.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So then the counting almost seemed like autopilot, right?
Yes.
So there's a fuzziness to the counting, and then a little bit of that mind has gone off with whatever the thought is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's actually good, because now we're beginning to recognize, and this is part of the work that is necessary to develop understanding of what the heck is going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's not the case that, we are fuzzy, we are confused, we are distracted, we easily get dragged around. and then suddenly we are free. It's actually having all those opportunities to see all the different ways. And what you just articulated is one way. Then we learn, we're like, oh, so that's what's going on. You know, that's one possible way of being fuzzy. One part of the mind has gone into autopilot doing the counting. The other part kind of in a half awake, half asleep, perhaps even drunk, you know, following that story. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we begin to see, you know, like, oh, that's what's going on. Okay, now let's come back to counting. So one thing I want to emphasize is not failure, learning now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Others? Questions, comments?
Dr. Lai,
Yes.
sometimes I've noticed when my mind starts to wander, I'm aware of it. And I'm still on top of the counting on the one hand, but at the same time, I realize that I'm starting to think about this other thing. And there's a moment sometimes where I'm almost challenging myself. Oh, well, I can think about that, but I'm not going to lose track of the counting at the same time, but then I lose track.
Yes.
So the mind is trying to do two things at once, thinking,
yes.
oh, yeah, I can maintain the count while I'm thinking about that other thing.
Multitasking.
But usually I cannot.
Yes. Yeah. So those are, again, you know, things that we learn. We want to have our cake and eat it too.
The other thing is that sometimes I had a really bad session where it took me like over an hour to achieve 21 counts on the breath. I don't know what it was that was so hard for me that day, but it was just one count after another. I was just it was impossible. I could not bring myself to stay focused for like over an hour.
Yes. Happens, right?
Some days are much better than others.
Oh, yes.
I'm driving at.
Now, when you take the light of absolute bodhicitta and use that to shine onto this, when you see that and you just say, well, yeah, part of the dream, then you let go.
The other thing which is sort of interesting is just the randomness of the thoughts that pop into your head.
Oh, totally. It's always random.
It's like, where does this come from?
There's these thought monsters, you know, throwing these thoughts like darts, you know. So we say these are karmic patterns, karmic seeds ripening as thoughts as well.
I found that when you repeated the statement, view all phenomena as dreamlike, I found that very helpful, actually, to sort of focus myself back again.
Yes. Yeah, so that's how, when we begin to introduce the absolute bodhicitta, is from time to time, you can repeat that line to your mind, not as a mantra, you know, like to silence thoughts, but really saying those words to remind yourself, relate to them as dreams. Then the power and the allure that they have over you decreases. Then you can ease back into the task at hand, which is maintaining presence, counting to 21. Kathy, I noticed, maybe I'm mistaken, you have something to say?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Hi. The thing this may just be another side of the same coin that you've been talking about, but tonight, and it's the time of day, I think, I struggle with sleepiness. But as we were considering that one-liner tonight, regard all dharmas as dreams, it occurred to me that the sleepiness itself was a dream. And I guess in a sense, the meaning I take from that is that just the awareness that maintaining an awareness of the fact that the sleepiness is a dream.
Yes.
Allows me to have, that the awareness is still there.
Right.
Rather than giving into the sleepiness.
Right. And some freedom arises, you see.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Even if you cannot completely like, oh, ta-da, but already some freedom has some space, as I would like to put it, we bring some space into the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's sleepiness or overactive. So whether it's the mind getting dull because the body is tired, maybe a really good pasta dinner, and then, right? Doesn't matter, whatever it is, like, the mind is just wanting to do so much, right? No matter what, like, let it, like, let the absolute bodhicitta one-liners work like Shantideva says, like a flash of lightning in the dark of the night. Momentarily it just and then let go.
Mm-hmm.
If somehow during this counting the sense of self comes up very strongly and bringing stress, then let the second line examine or recognize the nature of birthless awareness comes in like a flash of lightning, and then some space. That's how we incorporate these lines from the absolute bodhicitta.
Something else I've noticed. I'm sorry, go ahead. I spoke already. Go ahead.
Okay. Dr. Lai, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the second statement, examine the nature of reality.
Of birthless awareness, not reality, specifically awareness.
Birthless awareness. I was fortunate to have a quieter session, and I found many moments where I felt like I was more in awareness, and I was trying to think about the statement and kind of look at it, but I have to admit I'm pretty new at this, and I wasn't really sure exactly what I was supposed to be doing.
Sure.
Can you explain a little bit more about that? Elaborate?
Sure. So these two statements, the first one in the commentary, the oldest commentary that we have, it tells us that the first statement is meant to undermine our belief in the inherent existence of objects, of the things that we experience. And then it says the second statement serves to undermine our belief in the inherent existence of the subject doing the perceiving, doing the experiencing, doing the knowing. So as I like to put it, it's basically these two lines then together is addressing the objective end of experience, meaning what is being experienced, and the subjective end of experience, meaning what is experiencing. So to restate these two statements is basically to see how the subjective end and the objective end are completely dependent on each other, and that they arise together to reinforce each other, to produce each other, whereby if one falls away, the other one falls away. And so if we can see the momentary nature of experience, so that when we find ourselves being repulsed or attracted to objects, remember the first line. When we find ourselves being stressed or excited by the I, the subject, let the second line come in so that we don't get trapped, we don't get tricked into thinking either subject is real or what the subject experiences, the objects, are real. Yeah, so the words here says examine, and yes, there is a process of examining, which I will read from the commentary in a few minutes. But here, during the formal meditation session, if you cannot remember the exact words that are being used, the first and the second one-liner, just remember that the first one is telling us that the objects that turn up, so the content of what is being experienced, they are all dreamlike. Then the second line, that which is having those experiences isn't a thing, which is, a less fancy way of saying birthless awareness. It's not a thing. It's not a unchanging subject, so that you don't need to carry the burden of, I am having this terrible experience now. I am having such a wonderful experience now. I am having such a, nothing in particular is going on, but the I is still very strong, So in all three cases, very exciting, very repulsive, very boring. It's the very that we should drop. And the very comes from the I. I'm having a great time. I'm having a terrible time. I don't even know what kind of a time I'm having. All three cases, the I is to be understood as birthless awareness. Birthless awareness, if the awareness has no birth, it has several different implications. One is actually to say, if it is birthless, is it really there? Maybe not. But is it the case then that it's not there? Well, not exactly either. So this is not a clean answer. This is not the kind of clean answer that we want to logically work through. But there is a method going on there, which is basically, it's to kind of shake us up, so that we cannot say that it is this and we cannot say that it is that. And in this way, then in more traditional vocabulary, we say empty and yet vividly appearing and yet empty. So the example of rainbows are often used as an example, as a metaphor for this birthless awareness, that it's vivid, it's clear, but yet it's insubstantial.
The birthlessness, I've always interpreted that to mean that it's always there, sort of maybe in an ultimate sense, being as it's birthless. So it doesn't have a birth, it doesn't have a beginning, it doesn't have an end, it's always there. Is that a misperception, or is that?
It's one aspect of it. But if it turns into something substantial, then we have taken that too far.
The fact is, it's insubstantial.
It's insubstantial, yes.
Yeah.
So the birthless is to connote more a sense of you cannot like pin it down.
Measure it.
You cannot measure it. You cannot say it's this color or that color, this weight or that weight.
Has no physical attributes.
Not physical, and in fact, we also say not physical, not emotional, not spiritual, not.
So would
I
that
found,
be an empty quality then?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, in other contexts, we say empty. Yeah.
So,
Empty of what? Empty of self. Empty of fixity. All of it to me, like I said, these statements can have more and more profound levels. And certainly I can philosophize and read to you these profound statements, right? But as Kyoba Jigten Sungwan says, please don't teach things that you have not experienced firsthand.
so are birthlessness and emptiness synonyms, or are there differences?
You could say they are synonyms, yes. But why this word over that word often depends on context. Yeah, often depends on context.
So when you're saying examine the birthless awareness, and
Yes.
would that also include examining, the self? Where does the self come from? Is the self?
Yes,
all
yes,
that?
yes,
Is that
yes,
part of that?
yes,
that
yes, part of
examination?
it. Yes, yes. The way I understand how this formal meditation works is, it is not necessarily at this time, like this session we just set, that you systematically examine it. Okay? The examining, I think, should be done in a different session. Like while you're studying, and while you are considering and thinking and kind of engaging with it, on a more kind of discursive level, that you should do that in another session. But during this session, as you're counting breath, right, you should just remember, I guess you could say, the conclusions of that considering, the conclusions reached through the examining. So here is one example of how the examining proceeds, okay? So I'm going to read from the commentary. It says, contemplate in this way. Similar to the preceding meditation, the very mind that is negated, the very mind that negated the intrinsic existence of the perceived objects. Do you still follow me? This is going to get very technical, right? Right, because in the earlier line, right, in the earlier one-liner, it says, see how all experiences are dreams, dreamlike, right? So now it's saying, that very mind that you use, that very awareness that you use, that very understanding that you just used to undermine, right, the belief in the substantiality of experiences, that very mind, right, the very mind that negated the intrinsic existence of perceived objects, one in terms of its past, is no more. That mind no more exists. In terms of its future, it is yet to be. And in terms of its present, it's composed of three parts, meaning even in this present, whatever we call the present moment of that mind, you can still see how there is a moment before that, and then that present moment, and a moment after that. Then it goes on to say, it is devoid of color, shape, and spatial location. It cannot be said to be located in a specific point of the body. When analyzed, it is empty of all identifiable characteristics. Therefore, this mind is primordially birthless. So here, birthless is emphasizing more the emptiness rather than the always present abiding aspect, which in other contexts, you're right, birthless is sometimes used in that way. But here, it is more interested in using the birthless as a way of doing away with any and all possibilities for suffering, dissatisfaction to latch on to. Basically, the negation of subject and object, the purpose of the negation is so that suffering cannot land on anything. Yeah, for suffering to occur, it has to land on something, so to say. So I would say this is like the Tai Chi strategy, or the Jiu-Jitsu strategy, which is, you empty yourself, right? So when force is coming at you, right, you empty yourself. So then this force needs to go somewhere else. And so you just yield and empty yourself. You just yield and empty yourself. So likewise here, the purpose, the practical purpose of emptying both subject and object is so that suffering or dissatisfaction or stress, right, has no place to land. And if it has no place to land, then no problem. So the commentary, again, it says, similar to the preceding meditation, the very mind that negated the intrinsic existence of the perceived objects, which is what happened with the first one-liner, here, in terms of its past, it's no more. That means the mind that was negating the object, that which is past is no more. That which is future, it will never arrive. That which is the present, the minute you say now, where is now? The minute you say now, where is now? It's gone. It's gone, but is there really a place called gone? No. Future, supposedly it will come. Well, will it come? No. So then, past, present, future, if we see the interdependent nature of these three, and if we see the conceptual nature of these three, past, present, future, then it undermines the subject, which is here called awareness. So birthless awareness here is, in fact, yes, more emphasizing the emptiness, the insubstantiality of awareness. Now, another way of understanding the insubstantiality of awareness is the dynamic nature of awareness. so that it never remains static. So that, again, suffering is nothing but just a moment. True, happiness is also a moment. And so we see the momentary nature of everything. Mainly is, if we really see the momentary nature of all experience, nothing needs to get stuck. Again, suffering, dissatisfaction, stress has no place to land. We're not giving it even an inch or even an atom of space to land. And if it cannot land, then it you know.
So are you saying that when we are in awareness, that's because awareness is emptiness? Let me see if I'm understanding.
Awareness is empty.
Is empty. So then
Because emptiness is not a thing.
Okay. Yes, I got you. So when we're in awareness, which is empty, because of the empty quality of awareness, then that is why the suffering has no place to land. Do I understand that?
Mm-hmm.
And so then when we were doing this, you said that in another session, we're doing the analytical meditation on the no self and where's the self and all. But in this one, do you mean that in this one, it's more experiential? We're experiencing the awareness, not analyzing the awareness.
Right. Yeah. On other occasions, yes, you can say, okay, now I want to focus on developing the ability to kind of analyze in a more systematic way. Yeah, then you can do it that way. But here I'm emphasizing more, try to like not over philosophize all of this, and just take these words to be pointing in the direction of how to achieve freedom from being dragged around by our emotions, our beliefs, our concepts, our theories, our ideas, good, bad, this, that. And so even something as simple as, I was saying, oh gosh, the last few days, rain, and it's all dark, and I feel like lazy and sleepy, So one part of us might be like, like even the part that says, I should be more productive, I should be this, I should be that. But then, like, wait a minute. Now I'm stuck, Need to free. Need to know how to free, free ourselves from it and not get stuck.
I've been increasingly aware of the emotional impact of my dreams and also of other things around me. So I have good dreams or a bad dream, and I get these emotional feelings, and then I'm awake. I'm saying, hey, it was just a dream. Why are you letting this upset you? And then also, when I'm awake, things happen, they might be good, they might be bad. And I've found myself not letting it affect me as much. So there's almost an equivalency between the mind in its dream state and the mind when I'm awake. That there's a lessening of the emotional impact of events.
Yes.
And as far as reality being dreamlike, that's been very helpful, because these things, again, things happen that before I would have said, oh, this is terrible, this is upsetting, make me angry, this, that, the other thing. It's like,
Yes.
So I'm much less dragged around by the emotional impact of these things.
Right.
Both in the dream state and in the wake state.
Yes.
They're becoming more equivalent. And they're both occurring in the mind only.
Yes. So the dream state, awake state, right? They become more and more kind of like you understand whether in either state, right, it's the mind that is experiencing. So what these teachings are doing is that it's pointing us in the direction of seeing, like saying, in the end, learn how your mind works. Learn how your mind works. Learn how your emotions work. Learn how your reactivity works. And see them and keep looking, keep looking, keep looking, keep looking. It's almost like it says, when you keep looking, if you really look and pay attention, then everything else will take care of itself. You don't even really need to learn all the fancy ways of like how to let it go and all of that, Once we see, the true face of stress and suffering and dissatisfaction, then we're good already, because nobody needs to tell you to let go of it. You will let go of it. So the Four Noble Truths, I think the first noble truth is, to me, the most important in a way. If we see the first noble truth, if we truly see the first noble truth, the other three follows. It's just that we're not convinced yet. We just like, oh, I like to be Buddhist, so I will, sort of believe that, yep, noble truth of suffering. Okay. Actually, Buddha says, look closely, lean into it, really pay attention to it. And then the more you see, the more you see, the more you see, the more you're like, yeah, not worth it. So you don't even need to force detachment. You don't need to even force renunciation. They come. Last week, we were looking at the third point, some of the lines in the third point, right? So the third point is the point on taking adversities onto the path of awakening. And so the first line there is, when the world and its inhabitants are filled with harmful actions, are filled with negativity, transform adversities into the path of awakening. Release them into the path of awakening. All the negative conditions that we are facing, release them. Like releasing a bunch of dogs, wild dogs, release them onto the path of awakening. Let them run on that path, then they become the stuff, the manure of our experience will nourish our bodhicitta. Then drive all blames into one. One is not even yourself, not the self actually. The one that you should blame is self-cherishing, self-grasping. See how all our troubles come from self-cherishing. Then the other side of this coin is meditate, meaning train yourself to see again and again. Meditate means habituate. Train, learn to recognize kindness when it happens, and particularly develop gratitude for all the good that is around, and develop gratitude towards everyone. So this is like these two lines, drive all blames into one, is to be practiced simultaneous with meditate on the great kindness of everyone. And everyone here, include yourself. Last week I talked about, when you yourself engage in some kind of kindness, pay attention to how sometimes when that kindness is recognized by somebody else, it makes them so happy. And then you can also experience that happiness. The happiness that you see, the happiness that arises in us as a result of seeing somebody being happy, it says that's like a superior type of happiness. And we can train that by this meditate on the great kindness of everyone. So drive all blames into one and meditate on the great kindness of everyone. They are a pair. The next pair is these two lines. Meditating on confused appearances as the four kayas is the unsurpassable protection of emptiness. And then the best of methods is the four practices. These two lines are also working as a pair, and the relationship between of this pair is the first line is, you could say, more on the view side of things, or the absolute side of things. And the second line is more on a concretely, what are the four types of things, four types of practices that you can concretely do. So on the relative level, are the four practices. Then on the view absolute level, recognize that confused appearances are in fact the four Buddha bodies, the four kayas. The four Buddha bodies or the four kayas. So now let me read to you from this commentary by the fifth Shamar Rinpoche. So it says here, all forms of suffering and undesirable circumstances emerge from the mind's confused projections. And so this is the training in absolute bodhicitta is pointing us in this direction. So all forms of suffering and undesirable circumstances emerge from the mind's confused projections. Yet the very nature of confusion is, in fact, wisdom. Confusion is merely wisdom covered. Or when the innate wisdom, the innate wakefulness is not recognized, then that energy takes on the form of confused projection. So here, this commentary says, now observe the essence of suffering. So we have suffering, we have the experience of suffering, right? Or dissatisfaction, or dis-ease. So when we look at that, then here the commentary by Shamar Rinpoche says, look at the essence. Look at the essence of this suffering. Since it does not arise from anywhere at all, meaning when you look, you can see that this suffering doesn't exactly come from a specific place. And when we recognize that it doesn't actually come from a specific place, then this is the Dharmakaya. This is the reality body, which is at all times, nothing is going on. Nothing happens. Since there is nothing that will cease, it is the Sambhogakaya. The Sambhogakaya is the enjoyment body of Buddhists. In another context, right, enjoyment bodies of Buddhas are said to spontaneously appear for the benefit of beings. So here it is applied to the issue of suffering. If you can see that, in fact, suffering has no substantial reality, seeing the emptiness of suffering, in other words, like the way the Heart Sutra teaches it, seeing the emptiness of suffering, seeing the birthless nature of suffering, we then perceive the Dharmakaya, because the Dharmakaya is basically that which is always like that. Then when we see that, since suffering is not substantially real, therefore suffering doesn't go anywhere either. Then this is the equivalent of Sambhogakayas constantly appearing, not going anywhere. Since in between there is nothing that abides, that is the Nirmanakaya. Again, conventionally, Nirmanakaya are the appearances of Buddha on a level that you and I, ordinary beings, have access to. Sambhogakaya are the appearance of Buddhas to only highly advanced bodhisattvas. So here it's saying that seeing how suffering doesn't exist even in this moment, that is how suffering is Nirmanakaya. Then since these kayas are indivisible, it is the Swabhavikakaya, which is the dimension of the essential nature. Okay. Let me rephrase all of this. Yeah? So if you look at this problem of suffering, before we have any understanding of Dharma, we don't even know what suffering is. We just know, oh, I hate this feeling. I hate this experience. I hate this existence. Da, 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 da. And we don't even know that, oh, this is what is Buddha calls suffering. So then we learn, right? So then we learn and then we understand, suffering has a cause. The cause has an end, and there's a way to end, right? So we learn that. But that is not final yet, that understanding. Because when we lean even deeper into this issue, then you can ask the question, who is it that is suffering? Right? We begin with, oh, I hate this. And then Buddha said, okay, if you hate this, let me show you how you can be free of this. So we work on that, right? But then at a certain point, the Buddha will say, well, actually, do you know who is it? Yeah, that is the subject carrying this suffering. Then when we lean more into that, we'll see that the subject cannot be found. Meaning not substantially real, only temporarily appearing, momentarily appearing due to causes and conditions. Therefore, we say empty. Empty doesn't mean absolutely don't exist. Empty means existing in a very dependent way, existing in a very contingent way. So one translator, Stephen Batchelor, likes to use the word contingency. So Buddhist jargon is dependent origination, or sometimes interdependent origination. He uses this term contingency. Everything is contingent upon everything else. So seeing the contingent nature of all experiences, we can be free. This is really, this line here is using some fancy vocabulary, right? The 4 kayas. The gist of what's going on here is the same as the absolute bodhicitta lesson, which is that it's emptiness. And so even in this line, it says, right, this is the unsurpassed protection of emptiness. But it's using Vajrayana vocabulary. The 4 kayas is Vajrayana vocabulary. So it's using Vajrayana vocabulary to help us relate to the experiences that we encounter in our daily lives, right? So when we encounter something unpleasant, try to see how, right, the fact that this thing that just turned up, right? Immediately when it turns up, you know, we have a very strong reaction. It's like, oh God, I thought I took care of it. You know, next moment it's like, you know, it must be the accountant's fault. It must be the the bank's fault. It must be the blah blah blah's fault, right? But when you know how to stop there, right? Stop there and say, drive all blames into one might be a line that comes up. Yeah. But even then, better than, or not better, beyond just driving all blames into self-grasping, you also need to recognize, actually, what is this reaction that I'm having? Where does it come from? Is it substantially there? Forget about the situation. But my reaction to the situation, is it substantially there? What is keeping it there? And then we will see, oh, it's keeping it there because I'm keeping the projector turning, I'm keeping the on switch of the projector going. And then going, oh, I don't like this horror movie, I don't like this horror movie. Well, turn off the on switch. Turn off the switch. So when you turn it off, right, then the movie is not showing. But then more important to recognize, actually, whether on or off is just a movie. And the movie is not really real. That is the Dharmakaya. Then when you have more guts, you're like, okay, let's switch on the projector. You know? And seeing how, even though, right, things are going on, you know, like, it's not real. When you have the ability to recognize in this way, that's Sambhogakaya. And then when you're able to see that even moment to moment, right, like frame by frame of this movie, and you see the momentariness of each frame of the movie, when you recognize that, that is when you understand like this problem on the Nirmanakaya level. And to see that all 3 kayas are basically inseparable, that is the essence kaya, the 4th kaya. And so it's a fancy way of talking about insubstantiality and emptiness and appearances. Okay, all of this is on the level of view, on the level of, like you could say, absolute truth. Yeah. Then on the level of actual practice, or specific practice, yeah, that we can do, Recognize what do we do? This is known as the 4 practices.
Dr. Lai,
Mm-hmm.
before you go to that next line,
Mm-hmm.
Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh sometimes uses the word interbeing. We interbe or inter-are. Would that be related to what you just talked about?
I don't know.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not so familiar with his expressions. I think what he's talking about is dependent arising, interbeing. Yeah. In the tradition that he comes from, they are less concerned about substantiality. So they would use the word being, interbeing. In the Indic tradition, which the Tibetan tradition follows closely, they're more concerned about substantiality. So they're not so likely to use the word being. But I believe it's same thing. There is interdependent or dependent origination. But I don't know enough to answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
But if you are seeing some kind of connection, do share with us. So if you see a connection to what I'm saying.
Well, when I've read some of what he's written, he says that we are not as solid as we think, because in our relationship with our families, for example, all the other members of our family play a part, and we're like part of an orchestra. So it's not up to us. Everything is not just up to us, but everyone has a role and a say. And even with nature, he's like, we're connected to the bread that we're eating, and we share the same air. So he makes a lot of connections towards nature, to where we're part of the big picture, not so much like solid entities that are disconnected from the rest of the universe.
Yeah, it's dependent origination. Yeah. But as I say, in general, he comes from the East Asian tradition, Vietnam. Mahayana Buddhism in Vietnam pretty much is very similar to Chinese Buddhism. And so there, the flavor is more of a Taoist kind of flavor. It's the same ice cream, different flavor. The East Asian flavor, because in East Asia, there is no major, I would say, philosophical tradition that asserts substantial metaphysical selves, meaning like Atman. Whereas in the Indic world, the non-Buddhists strongly emphasize, this, what Buddhists will say substantial. Of course, they will say, no, it's not substantial. But the Buddhists will say, very substantial. The way you talk about this divine self, this indwelling self, So I think Indic and then Tibeto-Buddhism has remained less comfortable with, like expressions that suggest like we are one. We are all one. Indian Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism is saying, let's not go so far. But over on the East Asia side, they're much more comfortable. So it results in the expression is different. So Thich Nhat Hanh using interbeing, Yeah. Anyway, briefly, the fourfold practices. The first one is the practice of accumulating merit. The second is the purification of negative karma. The third is making offerings to malevolent forces. And the fourth is making offerings to the Dharma protectors. Very interesting set of 4 practices. I find that a lot of the books, modern contemporary commentaries of this particular text, books that are written for a wider audience, right? And often a secular, non-Buddhist audience, usually they don't know what to do with these 4. They kind of skip over quickly. Let's go talk about something else, because this is a little bit too, in their opinion, I think, like, oh my God, this is getting religious now. So let's skip over and go do something else now. But here, these are the 4 practices, accumulate merit, purify negative karma. Again, these 2 work as a pair. I've said elsewhere, the notion of accumulating merit sometimes is very difficult for a Protestant, a predominant Protestant culture. The idea of accumulating merit kind of triggers the caricature of the papist, who is like buying up indulgences and paying off merit, and then maybe the trauma of like Boy Scouts or Girls or Girl Scouts and their merit badges and not getting the merit badge that you want. And so merit is like, accumulating merit. Oh, Buddhists, shouldn't you not be attached? Why are you so concerned about accumulating merit? To the point that one of the teachers that I studied with, when he first came from Tibet, and then after a few years, he learned his English very quickly and learned it very well. At one point he said to me, he said, I think merit is a bad word in America. I said, why do you say that? I said, every time I talk about accumulating merit, I can see in their faces, like, yeah. I said, do you have another word for merit? He's like, can I not use the word merit? Because every time I use that word, doesn't matter who I talk to, they immediately go. So merit is fuel, energy, fuel. If you don't have enough fuel, how are you going to complete this journey? So, of course, we need to gather fuel. We need to gather the resources that will support our desire, our task of waking up. Moreover, merit is not something mechanical. It's not like you blindly do a bunch of things and you gather fuel. Merit only arises when you take pleasure in creating that good. So when you cultivate generosity, when you light lamps as offerings to the Buddhas, or you light lamps as offerings to the Buddhas for the benefit of beings, even better. And you do it and it gives rise to satisfaction. Like you are happy to do it. If you are happy to do it, then it is merit. But if you greedily do it, it is not merit. So we need to accumulate merit. We need to gather all the positive conditions and resources that will support our work, our desire to wake up. Working as a pair, the other side of this coin is purify negativity. That's the second practice. We purify negativity by relying on the 4 powers. The power of regret, in terms of the negative, unskillful things that we have done, the power of reliance, relying on the example and the power of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, the power of remedy, the specific practice that you can do to purify these negativity, prostration practice, vajrasattva practice. Different traditions have these different practices. And then the power of resolving not to repeat these, not to continue to create negativity. So this is the second set of practices. The third and the fourth set, again, functions as a pair. On the one side, it says, give offerings to malevolent forces. So this is really teaching us a way to relate to those forces that we habitually think to be our enemies, our obstructors, our haters. How do we relate to them? It says, make offerings to them. Recognize that they are our haters, they are our obstructors, and they are our enemies because we owe them karmic debt. So there are ritual practices of making these offerings. It says like every day when you eat, your meals 3 times a day, you can make this offering. Just leave a little bit, right? It's symbolic after all, but sometimes it's important to have some physical substantive basis for your practice. So it says it's a very good practice if your meals, 3 meals a day, you leave just a morsel of food and say, may my enemies, may my obstructors, may my haters take this debt that I owe you and be satisfied with this offering. Just as my hunger and my thirst will be satiated with the consumption of this meal, may your resentment be satiated by this offering. It says do that. When you do that, ritually, with heart, with intention, with understanding, when you begin to habitualize doing that, I can guarantee you, you'll begin to relate to your problems differently also. Instead of immediately retaliating or running even, then we learn to be brave, tough, patient, and understanding the problems that arise. So that's the gist of making offerings to malevolent forces. We're not making offerings to malevolent forces so that we can recruit them and send them to our enemies. This is not witchcraft, brujeria in Latin America. No, it's not that, okay? You're not making offerings to malevolent forces so that you can send them to your enemies, okay? Then the opposite of making offerings, or the opposite, so to say, working as a pair, is to make offerings to Dharma protectors. So here then, with regards to those who do support our practice, who do bring us those conditions that we want, that we look for, we express gratitude. So this is a way to help us cut through these habitual labels of desirable, undesirable. See the equal nature of both. So these 2 practices are given here. So for Dharmapalas, we have to say, like make an offering to them and say, may my practice be free from hindrances. Sometimes those hindrances come in the form of very enjoyable things. You're going to practice and somebody goes, hey, you want to come to a movie? Ooh, That's the hindrance that, you know, the Dharmapalas will get rid of. Yeah. So these are the 4 practices. So tonight, we're going to end here. We're already past half an hour. So this video, we will post, of course, it's on Facebook. It will remain on Facebook, but we will also upload it to the Drigong Dharma Kirti Circle YouTube channel. So please go there if you want to re-watch what we did tonight. And then an announcement is that if you're on the Urban Dharma mailing list, then you have already seen this announcement, or if you look at Facebook. So Sakadawa, the month of Vaishaka, according to the Tibetan calendar, begins this Saturday, the 23rd of May, goes for a month. But in this month, the first 15 days, the first half of the month is considered like the most important part of the month. So it's sort of like the Buddhist Lent. And some people keep this Lent for 30 days. But at the very least, people try to observe the first 14 days. So it's a time to kind of intensify your practice. And I think like as a practitioner, as a Dharma practitioner, it's good to have these kind of like annual cycles to kind of relate to this as Lent, you know, like you're going to meaningfully engage more intensively in Dharma practice. So there are many ways to do it. So you can do it in whatever way that works for you. But if you want a group experience, of course, through Zoom, then I invite you to join our daily practice from 9 to 11. Doesn't usually, so from 9 to 11, from the 23rd of May to June 5th. From 9 to 11, we are going to do a Buddha Shakyamuni and 16 Arhats puja. It will include mindfulness of breath meditation. It will include teachings from this one biography of the Buddha called the Lalita Vistara, or the play in full. So on our Facebook page, Urban Dharma, there's information on how to register. So there's a link. If you look at the poster itself, it will say email us, but actually easier, we provided the link in the announcement part, not in the poster picture part, but in the announcement part, there's a link. You click the link and you can register with just your email, first name, last name. Then automatically you'll get an email that will tell you, here are the links to the text that we will need for this practice. So I call it the Sakadawa Home Retreat. So for this home retreat, understandably, not everyone, and in fact, probably most of us, probably cannot do all 14 days at the same time from 9 to 11. That's understandable, but don't let that stop you from making a personal commitment to follow this schedule. So on some days, you're not going to be able to make it, but if you make a commitment that whether you do it together with us or not, you will do it on your own for 14 days, then I think that's a wonderful opportunity. Then I'm also encouraging people to read the Lalita Vistara, the biography, the play in full. It's the translation of Lalita Vistara. So on some of the days of these 14 days, I will teach selected parts of the Lalita Vistara. The Lalita Vistara, even though it's like the biography of the Buddha, is packed with a lot of very profound dharmas, very profound teachings, actually in the Lalita Vistara. Something that I myself just discovered last year. Many, many years ago when I was younger, I kind of browsed through the Lalita Vistara. At that point, I think I was only looking for the stories. then it left this impression, oh yeah, it's the life story of the Buddha. But last year at Urban Dharma, when we gathered every day to offer lamps and to do the Lalita Vistara, read out loud, then I revisited the Lalita Vistara and discovered, there's some really profound sections beyond the narrative about what the Buddha did and what the Buddha did. There's a lot of very profound Dharma. So I will also teach that. And so those teaching sections, of course, we will again put on the Drugong Dharma Kirti YouTube channel. So anyway, you all have a good night. Thank you for joining us tonight. And then if you meet us once a week, then next Thursday night, this will continue.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for joining, all of you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you.